Welcome to Smoke and Mirrors, the podcast where we make sense of agricultural policy. This episode is on regenerative agriculture and 45Z. It's joint with the K-State Regenerative Agriculture podcast. So the host of that, Nick Dieter, is going to join us. We also have Mitchell Hora as a guest. Nick, do you want to introduce the Regenerative Agriculture podcast real quick? And then Mitchell can tell him a little bit about himself and Continuum Ag.
Yeah, I'm Jenny. I think we've done a joint episode before, so your audience might have some familiarity with me. But this podcast is just an offshoot of the K-State Regen Ag initiative, which is an initiative the university is doing to kind of approach Regen Ag from all different perspectives, ag economics, marketing, agronomy, animal science. So we talk all kinds of topics. I'm excited for this conversation.
Yeah, and on my side, Mitchell Hora. I'm a seventh generation farmer from Southeast Iowa. Washington, Iowa is the area. And I am part of my family's about 1,200 acre operation, primarily corn, soybeans, but I'll be growing rye and wheat this year as well. And my family's been deep in the Regen Ag movement since before it was the Regen Ag movement. No-tilling since 19, cover crops since 2013, and have experimented a ton with that, lots of other inputs and stuff, and really seeing the results on the farm. Happy to dig into that as we go. But my main day-to-day is that I'm the founder and CEO of Continuum Ag. Originally was a regenerative ag consulting company doing soil health analysis, regenerative ag crop consulting, but have since really evolved into more being software focused. And today we are the leader in providing MRV for feedstock carbon intensity scoring for 45Z, which translates to we do the farmer measurement, reporting, and third-party verification for farmers to get involved in the 45Z tax credit. And we'll dig into what all that means here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yep, absolutely. Well, before we get into the literal weeds, I'd like you to talk a little bit more about what your values around stewardship and conservation are and how you see the role of government. This is something I like to touch on before we talk about conservation.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Really, I think for me and for our farm, it's about long-term legacy. It's about economic resilience just as much as it is. Actually, it's about economic resilience more than it's about environmental resilience for us. And of course, they go hand in hand. That if you're building soil health, we have found that we're basically self-insured. I mean, literally, I was just talking to my dad right before this because I got to make decisions on my crop insurance this year. Deadline's coming up. But it's like the crop insurance is super cheap because it's subsidized. So I'm going to do something, but I'm like, I'm not going to get a claim. Like I'm just wasting the couple dollars an acre in basically every scenario because we've been so focused on building soil health. And what I mean by that is, we've quantified that we can infiltrate 4 inches of rainfall in less than 5 minutes on our farm. We haven't had replant in more than 10 years now. We haven't had a crop insurance claim in years. My cost of production is super low. We've reduced our synthetic fertilizer use by 50% since pursuing these efforts. We've reduced our pesticide usage by 75%. And we don't use any other federal, any federal like cost share programs or anything like that. Just really seeing these things pay off. And in my family, like I mentioned, started doing this back in the late 70s.
That was before it was cool.
Before
it wasn't cool then too.
But yeah. I'm here I'm in a very unique part of the world of Washington County, Iowa, where we're really a hotbed for adoption of these practices. And a lot of other family farms were alongside my family decades ago when they were really starting to experiment with these things. And so we are, it's not my generation coming in, shaking things up. It was my dad's generation and those guys that they were already part of this kind of movement. And so that's why cover crops are really taken off here as well. And in this county, we're well north of 50% no-tilled and almost 20% cover cropped. So much higher than nationwide average of like 33% no-till and 5% cover cropped, right? So, but anyway, but to boil it all down, it's these regenerative practices I believe in so much because they truly are better. They truly are the path forward. It's about mimicking Mother Nature. It's about farming in nature's image. And they really are better than the kind of conventional way that most farmers are farming, and has led to a lot of issues, a lot of reliance on government. And what I've seen is at the beginning, transitioning to these practices, yes, there's risk. We lost $100 an acre in our first year using cover crops. And that's what was part of prompting the launch of Continuum Ag, to solve that problem first and figure out how to implement cover crops in a profitable manner. And after you understand how to do that, these things pay for themselves and truly are better. And I think so. My hot take on the role of government in all this thing is to enable farmer innovation. I believe farmer innovation is the number one best asset that agriculture has, is farmers being innovative. And so the issue on that is crop insurance boxes farmers so that they can't be innovative. Other federal program stuff box farmers in so they can't be innovative. Some of these different carbon programs or other modeling schemes box farmers in so they can't be innovative. I think government's role is to enable farmer innovation. So there's some change that needs to happen there. And I think it is coming about with 45Z. That's part of why I like it. But to put a bow on that, like for my crop insurance thing, I can get crop insurance on my relay crop, which is where I already have cereal rye growing this winter. I'm going to drill in the soybeans in April like I normally would. But instead of killing the rye as a normal cover crop, I'm going to harvest the rye over the top of the growing soybeans. Like the first week of July, we'll harvest the rye, then come back to the fall and harvest the beans. I can get crop insurance on that in my neck of the woods, but it's going to jack up my crop insurance premium 3x. So it's like, screw that. Like I know that it's going to be profitable. I know that my risk in it is super low. So I'm just not going to take insurance on it because it's going to screw up some of my other stuff. And so again, it's just one of those examples of government should help enable innovation, whether that be helping directly on farms or through our land grant universities and whatnot, right? Like there's a lot of ways to enable this partnership and growth and development. Anyway, that's what it boils down to. And for me, it's being seventh generation. I think a lot about the next 7 generations. And my wife and I have 3 little kids that are part of that 8th generation on our family farm. And this year will be my family's 153rd crop. So I'm thinking about sustainability and regenerative ag for the next 153 crops.
Right. Well, before we get into 40Z, there's one thing I want to follow up on a little bit. So my family farms in Illinois, and actually I had my brother on a few weeks ago, which was fun. He was pretty nice to me. But they've been, I think, a little bit like what you've been doing. They'll try one thing, they'll get it to work. It'll take a couple years. They'll try something else. Sometimes they'll mess up, they'll fix it. But they've been doing it really gradually over 3 decades. And it sounds like you had something of a similar experience. Do you think there's always a transition, or now there's like enough that's known that it's going to be easier for farmers who try to get started now?
Yeah. So I think my family's transition to this, starting in the late 70s, was definitely gradual for quite a while there. But in this, and then we started dabbling with the cover crops in 2013. But in 2015, 2016, when I started really getting into the data side of this, I was at college then. And then when I came back, I started getting involved in tons of different research stuff. So our, since 2015, our speed of adoption has been lightning speed on our farm. It was full bore, all in, and we've made these transitions incredibly quickly. And we've had years where we have north of 100 different variables that we are testing on our farm on, 1,000 acres. Like we have a lot of moving parts going on, a ton of things. I like to joke that, we can't make it easy on dad to farm. We got to make it, we got to make it challenging for him, because he's really good at it. And he really loves data too, right? He's very much similar mindset to mine of experimenting. But anyway, I do think to answer the question, because of social media and more awareness, because of the focus on these sustainability efforts, because there's just so many people talking about it, I think farmers understand that it's inevitable and that the world is going this direction and it's not going to go back. So farmers are coming to the conclusion of, I'm going to have to figure out how to do more of these sustainability practices. And there's enough evidence to prove that they actually are more profitable. Like they actually are better. Now, again, the very important principle of implementing these practices is you have to do it to the context of your farm. So it's not a one size fits all. You have to mind the context of your farm, but everybody can be doing these type of practices that we're doing on our farm. And if you're not at least considering them right now, you need to be. I mean, it's just a matter of time, and it really is better. And we'll get into, of course, 45Z.
Yeah.
I think the momentum has been picking up, and I went all in on 45Z 3.5 years ago because that movement is picking up. But I'm a like go kind of guy, and I see 45Z as the thing that is just gonna take it mainstream and take this movement through the stratosphere.
So what exactly is 45Z? Let's do that first.
Yeah, let's start there. So 45Z is a tax credit. It's a clean biofuel producer tax credit. So think of producers of ethanol, biodiesel, renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. Those type of folks can earn the 45Z tax credit. And the whole concept is that those fuels today have a CI score, a carbon intensity score. Think of it as the carbon footprint or the emissions per gallon. So those fuels have a default carbon intensity score given, or have a carbon intensity score given to them by the U.S. Department of Energy. And 45Z is a tax credit that incentivizes lowering the CI score or lowering the carbon footprint of the fuel. It was first introduced in August of 2022 with the Inflation Reduction Act. So this thing has been law for 3.5 years. So Inflation Reduction Act wrote it into law. Then the big beautiful bill, it extended the program through 2029 and put in some other key provisions. So this is not new. The issue as we sit here and record this today is that we're still waiting on some of the final rules from the federal government. And we'll explain that. But the overall concept is the biofuel producer gets the tax credit. And when they are calculating their score, and we'll simplify this to ethanol, a typical ethanol plant has a starting CI score of around a 53, call it 50 for easy math. Farmers have a default CI score on their corn of 29.1. So of the ethanol score of 50, farmers are more than 50% of the equation. However, with the adoption of regenerative ag systems like cover crops and no-till and better fertilizer management, farmers can drastically lower that CI score all the way down to a 0, which would be carbon neutral, or even in plenty of cases going carbon negative.
Could you go into a little more detail about how that carbon intensity score is calculated?
Yep. So it's called the GREET model. It was developed by the U.S. Department of Energy. It's been around since 1994. Nothing new. But the Department of Energy has a feedstock calculator. They just updated it on December 23rd, just of 2025, just a couple months ago. The USDA also has a calculator. I have very good reason to believe that will not end up being what's used for 45Z. And actually, one of the things that we are waiting for from a policy perspective is a new calculator that the IRS announced back in February called the ZCF FDCIC, which stands for the Z Clean Fuels Feedstock Carbon Intensity Calculator. Overall, long story short, there will be a new calculator to calculate a farmer's carbon intensity score for 45Z. And how it works is there's no soil sampling, there's no direct measurement. Instead, we collect the farmer practices and plug those into the model, and it spits out the score. So it's practices such as, what was your fertilizer, product, date, rate, application method? Did you use cover crops, yay or nay? What was your tillage practices or lack thereof? What was your yield? Did you use manure? It's those kind of things. So it's practice-based. And what Continuum actually does is we built the software for the farmers to put that data into, and we have integrated the CI calculator to instantly spit out the farmer's CI score, where then they can also run scenarios and in what-if scenarios to see what their score could be if they were to change their practices.
Do you know if that model makes any regional considerations? I know that's one of the big challenges in Western Kansas. We have, Kansas is one of the ways it's different than Iowa is that Eastern Kansas can be a lot like Iowa and Western Kansas is very different than Iowa. So when we talk Regen Ag in Kansas, that's always a big question. You mentioned the context element of all that. So I'm just curious how that plays into the score and the modeling.
Yeah, it sure does. Yeah. And I've been all across Kansas. definitely seeing firsthand exactly what you were talking about. But yes, the underlying biogeochemical model behind this GREET model is the DECENT model, which was developed by Colorado State, and it's a government and the USDA. So the DECENT model is behind it. And yes, it is county by county. So you could have farms in one county versus farms in another county do the same practices and they will have different scores. But yes, it is county by county based, which is great. And that's where I do encourage farmers to, either go onto our software and you can calculate your score for free. Or if you start Googling, what's my farm CI score, like you'll find stuff. But our software is called Topsoil. It's free at topsoil.ag. But ultimately, that is step number one for any farmers or landowners listening to this is you should absolutely know what your CI score is. Now, also keep in mind, just a couple minutes ago, I said there's going to be a new calculator. So your score is going to change and likely very soon. In early part of 2026, the updated calculator is due to go live. But yes, county based, very nuanced to the farmer practices. And that's part of why I like it. Right. And the other really important piece here too, for some farmers that are, maybe used to carbon, but 45Z is very different, that it is not based on additionality or your change of practice. 45Z is based on there is a default CI score provided to corn, soybeans, sorghum, and other crops. There's a default score, and you are in the 45Z program, you are guilty until proven innocent. So you are the default high emitting score until you prove that you are doing better. And that's what Continuum is here for. We help gather the farmer data, calculate the score, and get it third-party audited so it is legit and bulletproof to the tune of here's exactly the audit protocols that the federal government is putting upon us. And we help farmers go through that entire thing so that farmers and biofuel producers can work together to maximize this program.
So 2 questions about that process. So is this data that, do you have to answer 200 questions? Is it something you can plug into your existing system and it'll automatically populate? And then what does the audit look like? I imagine since there's tax dollars involved, there has to be some type of verification.
Good stuff. Yeah, this starts getting into the weeds stuff here, so you have to pull me back when you want to stop. But the simple just getting your score, it takes like 5 minutes, maybe 10 if you're not super techie. Topsoil.ag, because all we do there is just calculate your default score for corn, default score for soybeans. If you want to, call her a day. So it's not all field by field at that level. You can get your score in just a couple minutes. Not that hard. Going through the audit then is actual farming practices field by field. And you have to supply evidence. And evidence could be receipts, could be the shape files or the as applied or the machine files coming out of your tractor, your fertilizer spreader, your combine. So those machine files are great evidence. Scale tickets can work. Photos can work. Aerial imagery can work. FSA records can work. There's a wide array of different components that can suffice as evidence. And ultimately what you got to do is think of it, it's tax credits, right? It's a tax concept. So you claim that you did XYZ for fertilizer, XYZ for cover crop, for manure, whatever you are claiming, you just have to be able to provide a piece of evidence so that a third-party auditor believes you. And that's what Continuum has set up. We are the only company who has ever enabled farmers to go all the way through the program from start to finish. We did a test run of 29 million bushels. On average, the farmer spends a couple hours putting together all the data. You're 5, 10 hours at the most. It depends on how organized you are. If you've got good systems already, like a John Deere Ops Center or a Climate Field Viewer. If you're already keeping good records, it's going to be super easy. If you are a bunch of shoe boxes, it's going to be tough. Just like filing your taxes, right? If you have good records, super easy, same thing. And then going through the audits was not that big of a deal. How it works is we are auditing hundreds of, as we go forward here, we anticipate auditing 1 billion bushels a year at a minimum into this market. And we will bundle hundreds of millions of bushels together, submit them all to the auditors at the same time. They choose 1 square root of the farmers to actually go out and do the boots on the ground site visits and actually look through the data. So it's not every single grower every single year goes through an actual site visit and audit like organic farmers do. Instead, Continuum Ag and our software is verifying the farmer data. Then the third-party auditors come in to spot check and make sure that everything is legit. That helps to lower the cost as well.
Okay, so you get your CI score. If a farm gets it, they'll have a CI score for different crops. You got it verified, but the tax credit is for the biofuel producer. So can you talk about the next step?
Yeah, so the next step is still the biggest unknown in the rules. And there's two paths that this could go on. One path is that the farmer could have their data and then sell it to the ethanol plant under a mass balance approach, which requires delivery of the crop to the ethanol plant, whether that be to an elevator, then to an ethanol plant, or from the farmer to an ethanol plant direct. So mass balance requires that the physical crop and the data stay together. And then when you sell your crop to the ethanol plant, you are selling them the data as well that they can use to calculate the entirety of all of the bushels that they have produced to calculate their weighted average CI score of their entire production. So if I'm selling them 10 loads of corn and those 10 loads have a CI score of a +7, they can take that +7 on those 10,000 bushels into their overall score. And it's a weighted average. So say that they start with 29, right, as an example, and say they're an ethanol plant that buys 40 million bushels of corn a year, which is a typical plant. So if you have 40 million bushels, say you buy 20 million certificates or 20 million verified bushels that have an average score of, let's say, a 9. So you have 20 million bushels with a score of 9, 20 million bushels have a default of 29. Therefore, your weighted average is in the middle at 19. And that 10-point reduction in the overall plant score moves the needle for the ethanol plants, and that's what they can earn the tax credit on. But anyway, so mass balance means the farmers that are delivering their crop physically to the biofuel supply chain, they can add their data to it, and the ethanol plants can utilize that. So it requires some quasi-traceability. The approach that we are hoping will happen is a book and claim approach, where the farmers can calculate and verify their CI score field by field. They can sell their crop wherever they wish to sell their crop. Then they can sell their CI certificates in the open market to any ethanol plant on a book and claim, kind of like how carbon credits were, where they are decoupled. The physical crop is decoupled from the certificates, and especially for your folks in Kansas, where it's a super ag heavy state, ensuring that the crop can go where the crop wishes to go and enabling the data to flow into the biofuel chain is incredibly important. Or else it's going to be massively disrupted for the animal ag industry, and is going to increase costs because of government interference. So we are really aggressively pushing for book and claim, in part because of that, but also just for traceability and ease of scale of the market, and maximizing the impact on the regenerative ag movement. But anyway, this mass balance versus book and claim thing, that is still yet to come out in the rules. I have reason to believe that it'll be in the, still in the first half of 2026. We'll get that clarity, but that is one of the biggest things there's two mega things that are still missing from the farmer side of 45Z. One is the new calculator that we were talking about before. And number two is it crop and data stay together, or are we going to be book and claim and it's decoupled? Those are the two biggest things that are still unknown.
So let's say the book and claim, we get ideal world, we get that scenario. Would ethanol plants have to buy these CI scores that are verified on the specific crop that they're processing? Or in theory could, like, let's say I'm primarily farming wheat and I'm not really, producing a crop that's going into the ethanol, system, supply chain. That's the word I'm looking for. Could an ethanol company pay a wheat farmer who, no. Okay.
No. I have zero indication to believe that they would be able to. Now, there is an ethanol plant in Kansas that produces ethanol with wheat, right? So if you're a wheat farmer, you may be able to sell to them. And in the December 23rd updated CI calculator from the Department of Energy, wheat was included, both winter wheat and spring wheat. So there actually is some movement in the direction for those wheat farmers. Sorghum is also included. I think I mentioned that. Corn, soybeans, canola was part of the newest model as well. But no, the whole concept is I am growing the feedstock, same crops, same type of feedstock that's utilized by those biofuel producers. They have a default CI score. And again, they are guilty until proven innocent. The entire concept, though, gets very funky that on the ethanol plant side of things, how it works for them is that they have to meet red tape, which is, it's a government program, right? So the red tape for them is they've got to do a prevailing wage and they have to abide by the prevailing wage and registered apprenticeship program, which is tax credit type of jargon, but they have to abide by that. And then as long as they do that, they earn a tax credit worth about 10 cents per gallon for every 5 points they lower their score. And this is rounded. So for example, if your score is between 42.5 and 37.5, you have a score of 40. And the magic number, the magic starting number for this tax credit program is 50. So if your score is 45, you earn 10 cents a gallon. If your score is 40, you earn 20 cents a gallon. If your score is 35, you earn 30 cents a gallon. Again, you have to meet the red tape, prevailing wage registered apprenticeship. The money is to the ethanol plant, not the farmer. The ethanol plant they will all share at different rates. Some of them are really excited to share a lot of the money with the farmers. Some of them not so much. Ethanol plants can lower their score with a lot of different means, not just the farmer piece. And today, the farmer piece is not included at all. Now, the IRS just wrote the rule for 45Z, again, in early February. And that 172-page rule had 1 page in it about farmers. And it simply said, the farmers will be included, but there's going to be a new calculator. So you got to wait for that. And there's going to be new rules. And you got to wait for that. So the IRS did say farmers will have a seat at the table. Again, we're a huge part of the quote unquote problem today. And through the means of implementing regenerative practices, we can be a massive part of the solution. But we are still waiting for some of that. But anyway, the ethanol plants will be able to, it's anticipated the ethanol plants will be able to utilize farmers to help them move down to those next rounded CI scores and earn these credits. It maxes out at $1 per gallon. If you get your score all the way down to 0, right? The math of 10 cents for every 5 points. So when you get all the way down to 0, you maximize the credit. And really it's once you get below a 2.5, you round down to 0, right? In the rounding deal. So, very interesting program because, keep in mind the average, when you translate the money to a bushel standpoint, on average, the industry average is that there is 2.9 gallons of ethanol produced per bushel of corn. Wow. So if you take that 10 cents times 2.9, to convert from gallons to bushels, and that'd be worth 29 cents per bushel for every 5 points that the CI score is reduced. Now, again, I cannot emphasize this more. That is 29 cents to the ethanol plant. They've got to get a cut. There's cost in there. There's cost of selling the tax credits. There's cost of verifying, and a farmer will get a cut. We do not know what that cut is going to be yet. I think the market's going to work itself out. And it's going to depend heavily on mass balance versus book and claim, like we were talking before. But anyway, long story short, this is a huge, huge opportunity because of 40% of the corn, soybeans in this country going into biofuels and because of the average CI reduction that we are seeing. So I mentioned the starting CI for corn is 29. Continuum Ag has scored 400 million bushels, and the average score we've seen is 11.5. And that reduction of about 18 points would translate to, on a linear scale, translates to $1.08 per bushel to the ethanol plant. Again, we don't know what goes to the farmer, but whole point being is the farmers can contribute a significant reduction in this program as long as the calculator ends up being good, as long as the rules go together. But this is why I've been pushing on it as hard as I have for the last 3.5 years of my life, that this is a massive, massive opportunity for farmers. And like I said, the average reduction we're seeing is 18 points worth, a shareable just over $1 a bushel. On a farm like mine, doing the cover crops and reduced nitrogen, like I mentioned, we're looking at bringing dollars or so per bushel to the table. Again, I don't know what I can get out of that on my operation, but when you're talking 240 bushel corn and bringing that type of new money in, I don't see anything else in ag that comes even close to impacting agriculture and biofuels the way that this program could.
So with the book and claim system, if that gets big enough, I could see there being, they're going to create a market for carbon intensity reduction.
Yeah. And by yes. There's some things going on that I'm not able to disclose right now, but yes, you are absolutely correct. There is absolutely going to be some market mechanisms and whatnot for selling these attributes. Yes.
I'm just wondering if what the supply would be at this point and relative to.
Probably fairly low. I do believe that right out the gate, we will be able to do at least 1 billion bushels per crop year, just as Continuum. There's about 6 billion bushels total. You're looking at corn and soybeans that's going into these markets annually. So we anticipate doing nearly 20% of that just with the network that we have. Continuum has multiple competitors in this space as well. They will be able to do a good amount also. But yes, at the beginning, there's absolutely a supply and demand imbalance, that there's going to be a low supply of verified bushels at the beginning and a stable demand versus over time, more farmers catch on, more supply comes in, demand remains the same, and the market, of course, is going to react to that. Now, what I love about the book and claim thing as well is farmers and our carbon footprint is part of just about every supply chain. So this is going to be very disruptive to food and ag, food whole wild west of carbon. And it's government coming in to say, here's how you can quantify the farmer's CI score. Here's how you verify it. Here's how you track it. Here's how you retire it. Here's how you avoid fraud. Here's the financial mechanisms and what it's worth. And that, I believe, sets a precedent that is going to change global agriculture. And that's again why I've been pushing on this so much, is the ability to showcase a farmer's actual carbon footprint per field annually in a scalable system is so much better than some of these carbon markets. Rewarding early adopters who already have a low score versus only laggards who can meet additionality. That is so much better than the carbon markets. That this is based on your outcome and an annual thing and based on real ISO standards and audits, I just think is better. And then that it's tied to the production as well. And can be traced through these supply chains and stuff. And of course, at the beginning, I hope that this is going to be book and claim where everybody growing corn, soybeans, or these feedstocks could participate. But over time, it is going to be traceability. That's inevitable, right? With blockchain and how AI is going to continue to emerge, it's going to be full traceability in the future. And these scores and whatnot become the norm. What I also think is, today, the score that matters is your CI score, carbon intensity score, but it wouldn't have to be. It could be your impact on biodiversity. It could be your impact on water usage. It could be your impact on nutrient density, whatever it may be. But it's the same concepts of collect your data and define what you are doing at the field level, get that third party audited, calculate these outcomes, and have these systems for traceability and whatnot. I'm so convinced that this is where the world is going. And, again, hopefully this program gets across the finish line to set that precedent and enable this stuff to really take off.
So it could be picked up outside of ethanol, outside of biodiesel.
I'm already seeing it. We're in a lot of those conversations where, animal ag companies are looking at this. And obviously I'm assuming there's a lot of cattle folks that are listening to this, right? The cattle get a bad rap for the farts and the burps and whatnot. But that's only part of the emissions. It's my understanding that of dairy cattle, something like 45% of dairy cattle's carbon footprint comes from the feed going into those cows. And of that feed of corn, more than 50% of the carbon footprint of that comes from nitrous oxide emissions from synthetic fertilizer. And so this whole thing, it helps to bring real data to that big part of the equation as those industries are looking to decarbonize. And obviously they're doing a great job with so much innovation happening there. But most of that innovation's been on the feed additives and on the animals themselves. But that's only, half of the equation. The farmers and the feed component is another huge part of the equation. And this enables that data to come to the forefront.
So we need a little controversy.
Love
Talk
it.
about the calculators. So it's my understanding that you can't have land use change in these calculators for 45Z anymore, but that was a political decision that could change. Do you think that these calculations are going to continue to evolve? I mean, hopefully they evolve to become more accurate over time, but
For sure.
there's also the political process here.
Yeah. Big can of worms here. So, but yes, I know for certain that these models will continue to improve, will continue to get better, which I think is great. And we are part of some of those conversations where I'm like, hey, we're going to have lots of farmers at the table here gathering data. How do we enable some of these feedback loops and be able to work together and connect farmers with the scientists to be able to improve these things? Now, as a farmer, I'm not going to give away my data for free, but I'm going to have it and going to want to figure out how do I contribute it to science, because that's going to feedback, giving me more accurate data that I can bring to the market. And it just enables this thing to be more robust and be more long term. But yeah, one of the items that was deleted with the Big Beautiful Bill was this concept of indirect land use change, which essentially the concept of it is this acre is corn when it could be forest or it could be grassland. And forest or grassland would have a lower carbon footprint than it being corn. So therefore it has this indirect impact on greenhouse gas emissions. I think it's a bogus type of concept it's not a bogus concept. The concept is legit, but the reality of the world in that the time of U.S. history where we had the highest number of corn production acres was in the 90s, and we continued to lose corn acre production, not gain it because of biofuels. It doesn't make sense. In places like Brazil, absolutely makes sense, right? Where we are actually causing direct land use change. I think there should absolutely be an impact on that. That if you are actually converting grasslands or actually converting wetlands or timber into crop ground because of this, absolutely you should be penalized for that, of course. But when the mass majority of these acres that these feedstocks are being grown on have been feedstock producing acres for 100 years or more, I just think it's kind of an outdated concept. And that's why Congress voted to take it out. And then what it did as an impact is it lowers all biofuel producers' score by taking out that indirect land use change, which what that does is it enables more of those producers to be able to participate in 45Z because they're able to get below that 50 magic number starting point. It also makes U.S. feedstock more competitive to foreign feedstock that does have some of these outcomes still associated with them. So that's what it boils down to. But then from a political side, yeah, there's a bunch of other schemas for doing these models. CORSIA is one of them for global sustainable aviation fuel. It has a major penalty on corn-based ethanol going into SAF. I believe it's something like 12 CI points for indirect land use change. The California model gives corn-based ethanol a very high carbon footprint because it has something like 18 or 19 points associated to indirect land use change on corn. And now, like I said, for 45Z, they're going to ignore that concept. We'll see. We'll see how it shapes up, but that's kind of the gist of it.
Yeah.
It definitely is good for farmers, but yes, creates some controversy as well.
There could be the politics of modeling over the next decade or two.
My hot take on that is, are the models perfect? Definitely not. But if we're going to wait for a perfect model, we're going to be sitting here in 40 years still arguing that the models aren't perfect. So what are we doing? Do you want to try to get farmers to go more in this regen direction or not? And that's my take on it. I'm like, make the models conservative enough, but also you got to incentivize enough points for those practices to actually get people to change. Especially for cover crops and no-till and stuff, right? That we really want to encourage. But it is a bit of a balance between like science versus just policy and enabling, incentivizing behavior, right? So I'm not the guy who is choosing what goes into the models, right? Or how many points are associated. I'm just the guy that's saying, tell me what the score is, tell me what the models are, and I'll figure out how to make it work for as many acres as we can.
Absolutely. Well, some of us, our job is to argue about.
Yeah.
I was going to say, some people, it's their job to argue about models, but at the end of the day, you have to make these programs work. So,
I'm involved in a bunch of those conversations, Ryan. Good buddies with a lot of these folks that are involved in the models. I've been in these rooms and I'm like, tell me as a farmer, what data could I bring to the table to help improve your model? And then also, how do we just make this, again, as good as we can? But I also I go to so many of these conferences and meetings where they just sit there and continue to argue about the same concepts that we were arguing about 10 years ago on this science and stuff. And they're going to continue to be arguing about it in the next 10 years. At some point, you got to make a decision and keep moving forward. And that's the whole point now of government getting involved here, saying, here it is. We're going with this one. Move forward.
Yep.
Whether we like it or not, that's a different thing.
My question was, I was going to change the direction of the conversation just a little bit. But you mentioned sustainable aviation fuels. And before we let you go, I know that's a question I get somewhat regularly and a topic we hear about a lot. And I just wanted to know if you had any insights on where the conversation at, maybe a higher policy level is with any potential tax credits around sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah, part of the big, beautiful bill lowered the maximum tax credit for sustainable aviation fuel from $1.75 a gallon down to $1 a gallon. So it's equal to ethanol and biodiesel and other transportation biofuels. So that was a major hit on sustainable aviation fuel and especially the ethanol to jet pathway. There still is a potential there, but it absolutely took a hit with the big, beautiful bill. There is a amendment 245Z that I think it's in committee, but it's definitely not been taken to the floor and they're trying to figure out where to put it in, but it's called the SAF Act. I believe Senator Joni Ernst from Iowa was one of the co-sponsors. It might have actually been a Kansas person now that I think about it. I don't recall. There is an amendment that would bump the SAF credit back up to $1.75 and it would extend 45Z to 2033. Right? It's currently concludes at the end of 2029. So obviously we would love to see that happen. That's kind of the current status there. The thing that I'm very bullish on that maybe a lot of farmers aren't aware of is the ability for ethanol or any of our biofuels to go into maritime fuel, ocean-going vessels. So for sustainable aviation fuel, it takes 1.7 gallons of ethanol to create 1 gallon of sustainable aviation fuel. In maritime, ethanol is a drop-in fuel. You can just take ethanol right into these maritime ships, and ethanol is very price competitive. Ethanol is a very good opportunity there. It's something like a 50 or I think it's a 50, might be 100 billion gallon a year total market. Same as jet fuel. Jet fuel is like 100 billion gallons a year. So is maritime fuel. It's absolutely massive. Ethanol can be 1% of that. We produce 17 billion gallons of ethanol a year in this country. If you can find a home for 1 billion extra gallons, that's huge. That is a huge increase. And especially as we continue to improve production, right? And I think hopefully folks are coming at this with we're going to continue to produce more. We also can produce some of these feedstocks over the winter. Think winter oilseed crops. Like I'm talking with guys about pennycress. There's winter canola, winter camelina, very bullish on those kind of things. It doesn't have to be competitive with crops going to livestock. And keep in mind, more ethanol means more DDGs as well. That can go, and we can get both, right? I guess it's just thinking more of abundance versus always fighting all the time like we often do. But anyway, maritime, very bullish on that. The issue in that right now is that ocean-going vessels cannot get the RIN value in the renewable fuel standard. So if your fuel is going into maritime, you can't get the RINs off of it. So that's an issue. My local congresswoman, Mariannette Miller Meeks, has an amendment that has not been introduced, but it could fix that from a policy perspective. And then also there is a United Nations organization called the International Maritime Organization that has basically a renewable fuel standard for ocean-going vessels. Trump pulled us out of that. Part of it, he's kind of in a scuffle with the United Nations on a lot of different things. But the issue why he pulled us out was it would be a tax on ocean-going vessels who didn't meet these standards, and then that tax money was going to the United Nations, and Trump and the U.S. wasn't going to have much control and oversight on it. So that's why he pulled us out of it. But there is it seems like there's talks and momentum about getting the U.S. more involved back in those conversations. And anyway, maritime may be an even more direct, bigger opportunity, but SAF, of course. And again, it's a and to both as we lower ethanol being used on the roads because more electrification, more efficiency, whatever. Now it could go up first with and hopefully that gets across the finish line. But anyway, lots of moving parts here. Thinking about this in a ultra long term, decades in the future, we got to be thinking about these things. And these massive markets are absolutely huge opportunities.
Nick, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't. I was just going to ask you that. I think we covered a lot. I think that's probably enough for the audience to chew on for a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, there was a lot there. If folks want to learn more, we've got a bunch of stuff on the Continuum Ag YouTube page or Topsoil podcast. There's tons of info out there about this 45Z deal if you want to dig deeper into it. But number one is a big deal. You got to be paying attention, whether it's directly going to impact you or not. It's a big deal.
There's always two questions I wrap up with in my podcast. The first one is there anything that you do about your work that you feel like is misunderstood?
I've gone through phases of it that's been misunderstood, especially by the biofuel folks, where we have been very forward educating farmers about the financial value of 45Z and speaking about it as it's the financial value to the ethanol plants. We still don't know about it for the farmers, but there's been I've received some pushback where because this isn't fully done and across the finish line, there's folks that would like me to not talk about it. There's folks that would like us to not have this conversation because the policy is not 100% done yet. And my take is it's such a big deal, such a huge opportunity that we got to be talking about it ahead of time or else we're going to miss the boat. It's only a deal till 2029. We got to maximize this thing if we want to have the impact to prove to Congress, hey, you should extend this because this was a great program and very successful. So there's been some issues about that. I think mostly getting solved, and especially now that, like I said, I've been beating this drum for 3.5 years, and the indications are I've been right. So that's good. But anyway, but I think the other last piece is, I just see nothing but, again, abundance and opportunity to collaborate on this. This is not a farmers versus ethanol. We are huge partners for each other. Let's work together to really optimize this for everybody. And again, be thinking long-term resiliency of American ag that obviously right now is not from a financial perspective. That's a whole nother hour podcast. We got to be thinking about long-term here and collaboration and equitable sharing in these type of initiatives.
All right. Well, the last one should be easy then. You get to change one policy. What is it?
Well, there's multiple that I've kind of hit on here, but of course, number one, it would be getting 45Z done across the finish line, utilizing a U.S. Department of Energy feedstock calculator and a book and claim approach. That's definitely number one. The only other piece would be, again, back to policy should enable farmer innovation. There should be better pathways for farmers to be able to still have some of those safety nets that they would like, but to be able to be innovative, because we got to keep finding better ways and be able to move forward. That's another key one. And some of these policies need to be able to change to that far ag transition and getting, the aging population in ag is a major problem that's probably not being talked about enough. And there needs to be some major overhaul and some different policies to get younger folks involved and on the land and in control of some of this too. So that's a whole nother hour conversation as well.
That is
Anyway.
Certainly a conversation. We have a lot here. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, Mitchell.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, hopefully this all works out and there'll be more for people to look into. But thanks for having me on.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Home, home on where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day.